Okay, so you want to own an Amish furniture shop. You already have the picture in your head. A gravel lot off a two-lane road in Lancaster County, Pennsylvania, or Holmes County, Ohio. A hand-painted sign. Inside, the smell of fresh-cut oak and tung oil, sunlight coming through a skylight instead of a fluorescent tube, a bearded man running a hand plane down a tabletop that is going to outlive both of you. No sale banners. No particle board. Just quiet, patient craftsmanship and a price tag that somehow still feels earned. Here's the problem. That workshop is real. It exists almost exactly like that. But it isn't the business, it's the showroom. What actually decides whether that shop is still standing in 5 years or shuttered with a "for sale" sign nailed to the door has almost nothing to do with the hand plane. It has to do with a financial structure that most furniture shoppers and most business owners never think to ask about. So here's the thesis, and it's the whole video. An Amish furniture shop doesn't finance itself with a bank. It finances itself with your deposit. And that one fact changes almost everything else about how the business survives. Let's start with what an Amish furniture shop actually is, because it isn't one business. It's at least three wearing the same flannel. There's the sub shop. In Holmes County, Ohio, the largest Amish settlement in the world, where the Amish make up nearly half the county's population, there are roughly 400 furniture-related shops clustered together, and researchers with the U.S. Forest Service have found the industry there has kept growing even as the broader domestic furniture industry shrank. About 50 of those 400 shops aren't building finished furniture at all. They're sub-shops, small, often one or two family operations that make a single component over and over for everybody else. One Millersburg shop, Bentwood Solutions, started out bending buggy shafts and now supplies chair and table parts to something like 300 different cabinet shops. Low overhead, low retail risk, no showroom to maintain. Then there's the retail shop you actually pictured. The storefront on Route 340 or Route 30 running through Intercourse, Bird in Hand, and Strasburg in Lancaster County, selling directly to the English customer walking in off the highway. This is a completely different business. It carries showroom overhead, it needs walk-in traffic, and its revenue depends heavily on tourism. And then there's the large integrated manufacturer, a shop like Homestead Furniture in Holmes County, which we'll come back to, that started in a converted chicken coop in 1990 and grew into a 37,000 square foot, three-story showroom next to a 42,000 square foot factory, shipping to all 50 states and 10 countries. At this scale, you're not really running one furniture shop. You're running a small vertically integrated furniture company. Or, if you'd rather not build the sales side yourself, you sell wholesale through something like the Lancaster County Showcase, a wholesale-only showroom representing more than 135 American and Amish-made furniture manufacturers, which takes a 10% brokerage fee on sales to buyers who aren't full members. Layered on top of all three of those categories is a second variable that has nothing to do with size, which church district you belong to. A strict old order Amish congregation's ordnung might prohibit connecting to the public power grid entirely. A new order or beachy Amish congregation might permit limited electricity, or even a CNC router. Two shops half a mile apart, cutting the same white oak for the same kind of customer, can be running on completely different equipment and completely different cost structures, because they answer to different ordnungs, not different markets. Ohio's wood furniture industry as a whole contributed $4.6 billion to the state's economy in 2021, the most recent year with statewide figures, and by several measures, Ohio now leads the nation in hardwood furniture production, almost entirely built on shops like these. Now let's stack what it actually costs to open one of these, because this is where the postcard falls apart fastest. Start with land and a building. Even a modest workshop with a small retail showroom, built or converted in rural Ohio, Pennsylvania, or Indiana, typically run somewhere in the $150,000 to $400,000 range, depending on size and whether you're building new or converting something that already exists. The way homestead furniture started in a converted chicken coop rather than new construction. Then machinery. If you're staying old order and running entirely on compressed air and hand tools, a lean set of core woodworking equipment, table saws, planers, joiners, sanders, can run $20,000 to $60,000. If your Ordnung allows a CNC router, a basic 3-axis machine runs $20,000 to $80,000, and a 5-axis model capable of genuinely intricate custom work can run past $150,000. Add a dust collection system, which industry cost surveys put at $10,000 to $30,000, and a code-compliant finishing and spray booth, another $20,000 to $50,000. Then your opening lumber inventory. Hardwood pricing swings hard by species. Red oak and hard maple commonly run $4 to $6 a board foot. Cherry runs $6.50 to $14, and figured black walnut can run past $20. Even a modest few months of working stock, enough to keep a shop cutting without interruption, can tie up $20,000 to $60,000 in wood before you've built a single finished piece. Stack all of that together, and a lean, hand-tool and pneumatic family shop can open its doors for somewhere around $250,000. A full CNC-equipped operation with a retail showroom built for tourist traffic can run well past $750,000. And that's before we even get to the compressed air system, which brings us to the buried cost almost nobody thinks to budget for. It isn't electricity, it's air. In a shop that doesn't connect to the public grid, every saw, sander, router, and buffer runs on compressed air instead of a power cord, piped through hard rubber hose from a diesel-driven compressor out back, sometimes housed in something the size of an SUV. Woodworkers call it Amish electricity. Converting something as basic as a router to run this way costs roughly $600 to $700 just for the air motor, on top of the tool itself, and the compressor has to keep pace. Most shops need somewhere north of 55 cubic feet per minute at 100 psi to run even a single tool at full power, let alone a whole shop floor running at once. That's an entire category of infrastructure cost that a grid-connected competitor simply never has to think about, and it shows up before a single board gets cut. Here's the part that's actually the inside of this video, the thing you could repeat to a friend. A furniture shop looks like a manufacturing business. But the way most custom Amish shops actually get paid flips the normal cash flow problem upside down. In a typical retail business, you buy inventory first and then hope somebody buys it before the bill comes due. That gap is what kills undercapitalized retailers. A custom Amish shop usually doesn't build the piece first. It takes a deposit first, commonly a third to half the price, and only then goes and buys the lumber. Ernest Hershberger, an old-order Amish minister who's run one of Holmes County's larger furniture operations for over 3 decades, has described exactly this. He already had the money in hand, an order to fill, and a customer counting on him, so returning the payment was never really on the table. He'd simply find another local shop to build the piece if he had to. The customer, in effect, finances the company's raw material purchase months before the piece exists. That's not a business borrowing from a bank. That's a business borrowing from its own future customer, interest-free, as the default way of doing business. This is where the Amish in Amish Furniture Shop stops being a description and starts being the actual balance sheet. Start with debt. It's not quite true that Amish business owners never touch a bank, most keep checking accounts. Some use credit cards, and researchers Donald Craybill, Stephen Nolt, and Eric Wessner, who have spent decades studying Amish enterprise through the Young Center for Anabaptist and Pietist Studies, have documented Amish owners taking out loans and lending capital to each other for exactly this kind of startup. But there's a real, sustained aversion to leverage, to borrowing more than savings and cash flow can comfortably cover, and especially to loading a business up with the kind of interest-bearing commercial debt that bets on future growth to bail it out. One Amish-serving loan officer told researchers that across a full decade of lending, not a single Amish client had gone into foreclosure or forced sale. Wessner's research puts the 5-year survival rate for Amish-owned businesses at around 95%, against roughly 44 to 50% for new businesses nationally according to federal figures, and some of Crable's own settlement studies found failure rates as low as 2.6 to 4.2%. A shop that's carrying little or no debt doesn't need a good year to make a loan payment. It just needs to still be open next year. Then there's insurance, or the deliberate lack of it. Almost no old-order Amish business carries a standard commercial fire or property policy. Instead, in settlements like the Holmes Tuscarawas Wayne cluster in Ohio, shops are covered by something like the Amish Aid Plan, a mutual aid association that's been quietly protecting Amish property from fire and storm damage since the first half of the 20th century. By the late 1940s, the Ohio branch alone covered more than $6.8 million in property. There's no premium schedule and no underwriter pricing your risk. If a shop burns, the district's deacon goes door to door, or the community holds a benefit auction, sometimes raising into 6 figures in a single evening, and the money to rebuild comes from neighbors who know the same thing will happen for them. That replaces a real, recurring insurance line item with a real, if less predictable, obligation to the community. It isn't free. It's just not a monthly bill. Then there's labor. The Forest Service's own research on the Holmes County cluster found the typical Amish furniture shop runs a median of just 4 employees, often family, often working at less than a market wage in the early years because it isn't a hired workforce, it's a household. That's a genuine, quantifiable cost advantage over an equivalent English-owned competitor staffing up at open market wages plus payroll tax. And when a shop does need outside help, hauling a load of lumber, getting a delivery across the state, it commonly hires an English driver, someone outside the faith who owns a truck or van. Real WANTAD data collected by researchers who track the Amish economy put day rates for this kind of driving work at around $90 a day, against an Ohio minimum wage of roughly $8.70 an hour. Cheap, flexible transportation capacity, without ever owning a fleet or carrying the insurance and financing that comes with one. And then there's the flip side of all of this, the English customer. For most of these shops, non-Amish customers, tourists, regional buyers, out-of-state wholesale accounts are the majority of revenue. That's a real strength. It's also a real exposure, and you're about to see exactly what that exposure looks like when it turns. But first, look at where these shops physically put themselves, because it isn't an accident. In Lancaster County, the retail shops cluster along the tourist corridor running through Intercourse, Bird in Hand, and Strasburg, specifically to catch traffic that's already driving out to see the countryside and buy something at a roadside stand. That placement is close to the entire marketing budget. No ad spend required, just a gravel lot on a road tourists are already driving down. Meanwhile, in Holmes County, the actual manufacturing side of the business, the 42,000 square foot factories, the sub-shops turning out chair parts by the thousands, sits almost entirely out of sight. The Ohio Forestry Association has pointed out that most visitors come to Amish country for the food, the cheese, and the maple syrup, and drive right past what is genuinely one of the country's largest hardwood furniture manufacturing clusters without ever knowing it's there. That split is close to ideal for the business. The retail storefront gets to look small and handmade for the customer walking in the door, while the wholesale and manufacturing side of the same regional economy runs at real industrial scale, with none of the overhead of needing to look impressive to a customer who will never see it. Now here's what it looks like when the English customer channel turns on you. Ernest Hershberger's business, Homestead Furniture, is one of the more successful Amish furniture operations in the country. The 37,000 square foot showroom, the 42,000 square foot factory, a high-end custom line called Abner Henry that's since built a commissioned furniture collection for the Metropolitan Museum of Art. And it still nearly got knocked flat. For years, the tourist trade coming through Holmes County wanted Mission and Shaker-style pieces, recognizable, easy to sell to someone passing through for a weekend. Then, alongside a broader economic downturn, that demand, in Hershberger's own words, dried up overnight. The company had to reposition almost the entire operation toward a smaller, far more particular, high-end custom design market. Some long-tenured staff didn't want to make that shift. Hershberger has said that within about 6 weeks, he lost employees representing 60 years of combined experience at the company, all leaving voluntarily rather than retool around the new direction. Staffing across his 3 affiliated firms fell from a peak of 60 employees to 22 before it began climbing back. This is not a shop that went bankrupt. It's one of the strongest operations in the region, backed by a museum-grade design reputation, and it still lost nearly 2/3 of its workforce inside a matter of weeks when its core tourist channel shifted underneath it. That's the real risk sitting under "we sell to tourists." So let's do the arithmetic a shop like this actually has to run live before signing a lease. Say fixed costs, the building, the diesel and compressed air system, a hired English driver, dues to the mutual aid plan, basic overhead, run about $150,000 a year. Say the average finished piece after materials carries a contribution margin of roughly $1,500. Divide $150,000 by $1,500, and break-even is 100 pieces a year. That's 2 finished pieces a week, every week all year, before $1 of profit shows up. Now here's the gap between a good year and a realistic one. In a good year, that shop moves 220 pieces at an average of $2,500 each, $550,000 in revenue. Materials run about 35% of that, leaving roughly $357,500 in gross profit. Subtract the $150,000 in fixed costs, and the shop clears around $207,500. Now the realistic bad year, not a fire, not a lawsuit, just ordinary risk stacking up. Hardwood and lumber costs spike, the way they genuinely have through late 2025 and into 2026, with new federal tariffs on lumber and wood products layered on top of wildfires across Western Canada that pushed lumber futures above $640 per thousand board feet by late July 2026, a one-year high. Materials cost climbs from 35% of revenue to 45%. At the same time, tourist taste shifts the way it did on Ernest Hershberger, and instead of 220 pieces, the shop sells 130. Revenue drops to $325,000. Cost of goods eats $146,250 of it, leaving $178,750 in gross profit. Subtract that same $150,000 in fixed costs, and the shop clears about $28,750 for the year. That's the gap, roughly $207,500 in a good year against $28,750 in a bad one, a swing of nearly $180,000 on the exact same building, the exact same tools, the exact same craftsmen. And here's the part that actually matters. In the bad year, that shop isn't closing. Nobody's calling a bankruptcy attorney. It made $28,750 instead of $207,500, and that's a disappointing year, not a last one. Take that identical swing and put it on a shop financed the way most furniture manufacturers actually are: a construction loan on the building, an equipment loan on the CNC router, a line of credit carrying the inventory, and that same 45% materials cost and 40% volume drop doesn't leave you with a disappointing year. It leaves you underwater on a loan payment that doesn't care whether tourists want admission furniture this year or not. So go back to that gravel lot off Route 340, the smell of oak dust, the hand plane, the price tag that somehow still feels fair. None of that changes. That part of the postcard is completely real. What's underneath it is a business that took your deposit before it bought the wood, that answers to a church district instead of a loan covenant, that traded a monthly insurance premium for a neighbor's promise to show up if the building burns, and that can absorb a genuinely bad year, tourists gone, lumber up, staff walking out the door, and still open on time the next morning. An Amish furniture shop doesn't finance itself with a bank. It finances itself with your deposit. And that isn't a quirk of the culture. That's the actual reason the shop is still standing, in a business where, nationally, half the competition doesn't make it 5 years.